The morning started like any other at the Horizon Research Outpost. Soft light crept across the metal walls of the small research station, nestled on the distant planet of Nova Prime. Jaehoon Park stood by the large observation window, his breath creating a small fog on the thick glass. He watched the rocky landscape outside, where red dust swirled between sharp mountain peaks. At 32, Jaehoon was not an exciting man. He was a geological researcher who preferred rocks to people. His dark hair was always slightly messy, and his work uniform hung loosely on his thin frame. Most days, he would spend hours analyzing rock samples, mapping mineral deposits, and writing long reports that few people would ever read. The station was home to 23 researchers from different parts of Earth. It was a quiet place, far from the busy cities and noisy spaceports. They studied the planet's unique geological features, hoping to understand more about planetary formation and potential resource extraction. Nobody saw them coming. The first sign was a strange vibration. It was so slight that most researchers thought it was just another small ground tremor. But Jaehoon knew something was different. The rocks around the station began to tremble in a way he had never seen before. Then came the sound. A high-pitched whine cut through the station's quiet atmosphere. It started low and then grew louder, like 1,000 metal knives scraping against each other. Jaehoon's coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. The researchers looked at each other with growing fear. "What is that?" asked Elena, a botanist from Brazil, her voice shaking. Before anyone could answer, the first explosion ripped through the eastern wing of the research station. Alarms blared. Red emergency lights began to flash. The ground shook with such force that people were thrown from their chairs. Jaehoon rushed to the observation window. What he saw made his blood run cold. Massive metallic shapes were descending from the sky. They were not like any spacecraft he had ever seen. These were machines, cold, precise, and completely alien. They moved with a mechanical precision that seemed almost alive. Dozens of robotic units dropped from enormous carrier ships, each one looking like a deadly spider made of sharp metal and glowing circuits. The robots hit the ground running, literally. They moved faster than any human could, cutting through the research station's outer defenses like they were made of paper. Laser weapons erupted from their mechanical limbs, cutting down anything that moved. "Everyone to the emergency shelters," shouted Dr. Kim, the station's lead researcher. Chaos erupted. Researchers ran in all directions. Some grabbed important research data. Others simply tried to survive. Jaehoon knew he had to do something. He wasn't a fighter, but he wasn't going to die without trying. He grabbed a portable computer and began downloading critical research data. His hands shook, but his mind was clear. If these machines wanted to destroy everything, he would make sure they didn't get all of it. Another explosion rocked the station. The walls began to crack. Smoke filled the corridors. Jaehoon could hear screaming and the mechanical sounds of the invading robots. A massive robot crashed through the wall closest to him. It was at least 3 meters tall, with multiple arms ending in sharp cutting tools and energy weapons. Its head was a complex array of sensors and processing units that seemed to look right through Jaehoon. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Man versus machine. Researcher versus invader. Then Jaehoon did the only thing he could. He ran. The portable computer was clutched tightly to his chest. Behind him, he could hear the mechanical steps of the robot. Each step was precise, calculated, inhuman. He didn't know why they were attacking. He didn't understand their purpose. But in that moment, Jaehoon knew one thing. Humanity was under attack, and nothing would ever be the same again. As he ran through the burning research station, with alien machines destroying everything in their path, Jaehoon Park became something more than just a quiet researcher. He became a survivor, and survivors tell stories. The mountain air was cold and sharp. Jaehoon's breathing came in ragged gasps as he pushed through the thick forest. Behind him, the sky glowed orange. The research station was gone. completely destroyed by the alien robots. His portable computer bounced against his side, the only proof that his previous life had existed. Hours passed. His legs ached. His hands were cut and bruised from climbing rocky paths and pushing through sharp branches. But he was alive, and that was something. As the sun began to set, he spotted a small opening in the rock face. It looked like a cave entrance, hidden by thick bushes. Jae-hoon didn't have many choices. The sound of distant robot patrols made his skin crawl. He had to find shelter. The cave was deeper than he expected. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he realized it wasn't just a natural cave. Someone had been here before. There were signs of recent activity. A small cooking area, some blankets, emergency supplies scattered around. "Who's there?" A deep voice broke the silence. Jae-hoon froze. His hand instinctively went to his side, but he wasn't carrying a weapon, just his computer and a small first aid kit. A man stepped out of the shadows. He was tall and muscular, with hard eyes that had seen too much. Military training was written in every line of his body. "I'm Sung-min Kim," the man said. "Used to be a combat instructor before all this happened." Jae-hoon raised his hands. "I'm Jae-hoon Park, a researcher from the Horizon Outpost. I think I'm the only one who escaped." Sung-min studied him for a moment. Then he pointed to a small pile of supplies. "Sit, eat something. You look like you're about to fall over." As Jae-hoon ate a simple meal of dried food, more people began to emerge from deeper inside the cave. A woman with technical equipment draped around her neck approached. "I'm Yeonja Lee," she said, "communications specialist." By midnight, Jae-hoon learned their story. Some men had been leading a wilderness survival training when the robot invasion began. Yeonji was part of a communications team tracking unusual signals when her entire team was wiped out. They had found each other by chance, just like Jae-hoon. "We need a plan," Sung-min said, spreading a rough map on a flat rock. "These robots aren't just attacking. They're systematic, methodical." Yeonji connected some communication devices. "I've been picking up fragments of their communication signals. It's like they're processing information constantly. No emotion, just pure calculation." Jae-hoon realized something. "My computer," he said, pulling out the portable device. "I downloaded research data before escaping. Maybe we can learn something about these robots." For the next few hours, they worked together. Yeonji used her technical skills to extract hidden information from Jae-hoon's computer. Sung-min analyzed potential weak points in the robotic invasion. Jae-hoon provided geological insights that might help them understand the robot's potential movement patterns. As dawn broke, they had a basic plan. "We can't fight them directly," Sung-min explained. "They're too advanced, too strong, but we can fight smart." Yeonji showed them a map with several marked locations. "These are communication relay points. If we can disrupt their signals, we might create confusion in their system." More survivors trickled in. Some were injured, some were scared, but each brought a piece of information, a skill, a small hope. By midday, their cave had become more than a hiding place. It was becoming a base, a resistance center. Jae-hoon looked around. A month ago, he would have been happy spending days alone with his rock samples. Now he was part of something bigger, a fight for survival. "We'll need training," Sung-min said, looking at the new arrivals. "Not just physical training. We need to think differently. These robots expect predictable human behavior. We'll give them something else." Yeonji smiled for the first time. "We'll become unpredictable." Outside, robot patrols continued their systematic search. But inside the mountain cave, something was growing, something the robots could never understand. Human hope. The cave had become a busy place. Makeshift tables covered with maps, electronic devices, and scattered papers filled the central area. Jae-hoon sat hunched over a computer, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. Lines of strange code flickered on the screen. "I think I'm finding a pattern," he muttered. Yanjai leaned closer. Her eyes were tired but focused. They had been working for hours, trying to understand the alien robots that had destroyed their world. Some men stood by the cave entrance, keeping watch. His military training made him restless. Every sound outside made him tense. But today, he was listening to Jae-hoon's research. The robots aren't just machines, Jae-hoon explained. They're following a complex set of rules, like a very advanced computer program. But programs can be broken. Yeonji nodded. Their communication signals are interesting. They're constantly sharing information, but it's not like human communication. It's more like a giant brain trying to solve a problem. A new survivor named Min Seo approached. He had been a computer engineer before the invasion. They're using something like a decision tree, he said, but much more complicated. Each robot makes choices based on pre-programmed rules and the information from other robots. Some men walked closer, which means they have a weakness. Exactly, Jae-hoon said. They can't think outside their programming. If we do something unexpected, they might get confused. Over the next few days, the survivors worked on a plan. They studied the robot patrols. They tracked their movement patterns. They learned how the robots processed information. One evening, Yeonji made a breakthrough. She had been working on a way to disrupt the robots' communication signals. "Look at this," she said, showing a complex diagram on her screen. The diagram showed how the robots shared information. It was like a giant spider web of connections. Each robot was a point in the web, constantly sending and receiving data. If we can break some of these connections, Min Seo explained, we can create confusion in their system. Some men had been training the survivors, not just in fighting, but in thinking differently. These robots expect humans to run, he told them. So we'll do something else. They began to prepare small teams. Each team would have a specific job. Some would work on communication disruption. Others would gather information. Some would prepare for direct action. Jae-hoon realized something important. The robots saw humans as a simple problem to solve, but humans were anything but simple. One night, a scout returned with important information. The large robot processing center was located in a valley about 50 kilometers away. It seemed to be the main communication hub for the robot invasion. We can't attack it directly, some men said, but we can cause problems. The plan began to take shape. They would create multiple small disruptions, false signals, unexpected movements, things that didn't make sense to a computer brain. Yeonji worked on creating special devices, small machines that could send confusing signals. Min Seo helped her understand the robot communication patterns. They think in straight lines, he explained. Humans think in circles, curves, unexpected ways. As they worked, more survivors joined them. Some were injured, some were scared, but all of them wanted to fight back. Jae-hoon looked at the group. A month ago, he would have been happy alone with his rock samples. Now he was part of something bigger. We're not just surviving, he told the group one evening. We're learning. We're fighting back. Outside, robot patrols continued their systematic search. But inside the mountain cave, something was growing. A plan. A hope. A way to fight an enemy that thought it was unbeatable. The real war was just beginning. The abandoned industrial complex looked like a metal skeleton against the gray sky. Rusted machines stood like frozen giants, silent witnesses to a world before the robot invasion. Jae-hoon checked his equipment one more time. This was not something he was trained to do. Are you ready? Some men whispered. Jae-hoon nodded. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. They had a plan. A crazy plan, but a plan. Two teams were moving into position. Yeonji and Min Seo would handle the technical part. Some men would lead the direct action team. And Jae-hoon, he was the unexpected element. A small robot patrol moved through the complex. 3 machines, each about 2 meters tall. They moved with perfect coordination, scanning the area with dozens of sensors. Now, Sung Min said into the communication device. Yanji's devices began to work. Strange signals started to bounce around the complex. Not random signals, carefully designed signals that would confuse the robot's communication system. The robots stopped. Their movements became less smooth. Something was wrong with their information flow. That was when Jae-hoon made his move. He threw a small device, something Min Seo had created. It looked like a simple rock, but inside was a complex piece of electronic equipment designed to send out specific signals. The robots turned. Their sensors focused on the device. Sung Min moved fast, too fast for machines expecting slow human movements. He used an old military trick, moving in a way that broke expected patterns. One robot went down, then another. The third robot tried to call for help, but its communication system was already compromised by Yanji's devices. Capture that one, Sung Min ordered. They worked quickly. Jae-hoon, who had never held a weapon in his life, helped drag the damaged robot to a waiting vehicle. Back in their mountain base, they examined their prize. Min Seo worked carefully, connecting devices to understand the robot's inner workings. "This is amazing," he said after hours of work. "Look at this processing unit." The robot's inner systems were complex, but not impossible to understand. Each part told a story about how the robots thought, how they made decisions. "They work like a big brain," Yunji explained, "but a brain with very strict rules. No imagination, no true thinking." Jae-hoon looked at the captured robot. Something clicked in his mind. "They solve problems," he said, "but only problems they already know." Over the next days, they learned more. The robot's systems were like a massive decision tree. If this happens, then do that. No room for surprise. No room for creativity. Sung Min saw the opportunity. "We can use this," he told the group. "If we do things they don't expect, they won't know how to respond." They began to plan their next move. Not a big attack. Something small. Something smart. The robot invasion had one big weakness. It expected humans to behave in predictable ways. To run. To hide. To fight in expected patterns. But these humans were different. Jae-hoon looked at the group. A month ago, he was just a researcher. Now he was part of something bigger. A fight for survival. A fight to show that human creativity was more powerful than any machine. Outside, robot patrols continued their systematic search. But inside their mountain base, a new kind of warfare was being planned. A war where humans would be the most unpredictable weapon. Yanji's workspace looked like a mix between a computer lab and a war room. Circuit boards, broken robot parts, and strange electronic devices covered every surface. Her fingers moved quickly across multiple screens, lines of code dancing beneath her touch. "I think I've found something," she muttered. Jae-hoon and Min Seo looked up. They had been working for days without much sleep. The mountain base was quiet except for the sound of electronic equipment and occasional whispered conversations. The captured robot had given them more than they expected. Its inner systems were like a complex puzzle, and Yanji was good at solving puzzles. "These are their communication channels," she explained, pointing to a complex diagram. "Not just simple radio signals. It's more like a living network. Each robot shares information constantly." Min Seo leaned closer. "Which means if we can interrupt that network, we can create confusion." Sung Min entered the room. He looked tired but determined. More survivors had joined their group. Each one brought a skill, a piece of knowledge that might help them survive. "What have you got?" he asked. Yanji smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had found a weakness. "I'm building something," she said. "A device that can send signals that look like robot communication. But they're not. They're designed to create doubt in their system." Over the next week, she worked nonstop. Other survivors helped. Some found electronic parts. Others gathered information about robot movements. Everyone had a job. The device looked simple. a small box with strange antennas, but inside was a complex system designed to trick the robot's communication network. Think of it like a lie, Min Seo explained to the other survivors, but a lie that a computer can understand. They tested the device in small ways first. A robot patrol would suddenly stop. Another would move in the wrong direction. Small disruptions that didn't look like an attack. Jae-hoon realized something important. The robots were learning. But they were learning like a computer, not like a living thing. Each action was processed, calculated, but not truly understood. They have rules, he told the group. Very strict rules. If we break those rules, they get confused. Some men had been training the survivors, not just in fighting, but in thinking differently. These robots expect certain responses, he said, so we'll give them something else. One night, a scout returned with important information. A large robot processing center was located in a valley. It seemed to be the main communication hub for the robot invasion. Yeonji's device could be their weapon. They prepared carefully. Small teams would move into position. Some would create distractions. Others would use the special communication devices. The plan was simple but clever. Create confusion. Break the robot's understanding of the situation. We're not trying to destroy them, Yeonji explained. We're trying to make them doubt their own information. The night before the mission, the survivors gathered. Some were scared. Some were excited. But all of them were ready to fight back. Jae-hoon looked around the room. A month ago, he was just a researcher who liked rocks. Now he was part of something bigger, a fight for survival. A fight to show that human creativity was more powerful than any machine. Outside, robot patrols continued their systematic search. But inside their mountain base, a plan was taking shape. A plan that showed the robots that humans were more than just a problem to be solved. A plan that would change everything. The map on the wall was covered in red and blue markers. Each marker told a story of survival, of small victories against the robot invasion. Jae-hoon studied the map carefully. What started as a small group in a mountain cave had become something much bigger. Some men walked in, his face hard and serious. More survivors are coming, he said, from different parts of the planet. The resistance had grown. What began as a small group of researchers and survivors was now a network, a living, breathing organization that moved like water, flexible, unpredictable, impossible to crush. Communication was key. Yeonji had created a system of hidden radio networks, small devices that could send signals without being easily detected. Each survivor group became a node in a massive human network. They can't track us if we keep moving, Min Seo explained to new arrivals. We're not a target. We're a movement. The robot invasion had one big mistake. It treated humans like a simple problem to solve. But humans were anything but simple. Each survivor group had a special job. Some gathered information. Some created electronic tricks to confuse the robots. Others prepared for direct action. Some Min's training became legendary. He taught survivors how to move, how to think. Not like soldiers, but like survivors. People who could adapt. People who could surprise. One day, a massive plan took shape. The robots had a central communication hub in a large valley. It was their brain. The place where all robot signals were processed. Attacking it directly was impossible. The robots would see a direct attack coming from kilometers away. So they planned something different. Multiple survivor groups would move at the same time, not to attack, but to create confusion, to send false signals, to make the robots question their own information. Jae-hoon had become more than a researcher. He was now a strategist. His understanding of patterns, learned from years of studying rocks and geological formations, helped them plan their attacks. Robots think in straight lines, he told the group. Humans think in circles, in unexpected ways. The night before the big operation, survivors gathered in hidden locations. Some were young, some were old, some had been doctors, some had been farmers. Now, they were all fighters. Not fighters with big weapons, but fighters with something more powerful: human creativity. Yanji's communication devices were ready. Small boxes that could send signals that looked like robot communication, but they were designed to create doubt, to make the robots question their own information. Some men went over the plan one more time. "We're not trying to destroy them," he said. "We're trying to make them lose trust in their own system." The plan was complex but simple. Multiple groups would move at the same time. Some would create electronic distractions. Others would move in ways the robots would not expect. In one location, a group would deliberately move slowly. In another, they would move fast. In another, they would split up in random directions. No single group was strong, but together, they were powerful. The robot invasion had destroyed cities, had killed millions, but it had made one big mistake. It had made humans work together. As dawn broke, the resistance began to move. Small groups, spread out, connected by a network of communication that the robots could not understand. Jae-hoon looked at the map. What started as a small group in a mountain cave was now a planet-wide resistance. Outside, robot patrols continued their systematic search. But today would be different. Today, humans would show that they were more than just a problem to be solved. Today, the real fight would begin. The alien commanders were not alive, not in the way humans understood life. They were a massive network of processing units, spread across enormous ships in high orbit. Their entire existence was about solving problems, calculating, processing. And right now, they were confused. Data streams filled their central processing core. Millions of signals from their robot units were becoming strange, unpredictable. Nothing made sense anymore. A robot patrol would suddenly stop moving. Another would change direction for no logical reason. Communication networks were breaking down. The patterns that had worked perfectly during invasions of other planets were failing. Recalculating, the central system repeated, but calculation was becoming difficult. In the mountain base, Jae-hoon and Yanji watched their latest data. "They're trying to understand," Yanji said. Her fingers moved across computer screens. "But they can't." Some men walked in. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad for them," Min Seo replied. "Very bad." The human resistance had discovered something important. The alien robots followed strict rules. If those rules were broken, the entire system became confused. It was like giving a computer a problem it could not solve. Humans were that unsolvable problem. The alien commanders began to make changes. They started to redesign their robot units, adding more complex decision-making algorithms, trying to create machines that could handle unexpected human behavior. But humans were always one step ahead. When the robots learned to handle one trick, the resistance would create another. A constant game of strategy, of thinking faster, of being more creative. Some robot units began to malfunction completely. Their communication systems would break down. They would stop moving in the middle of a search pattern, or move in completely random directions. The alien commanders processed this information. They looked for patterns, for ways to solve this human problem. But humans were not a problem to be solved. They were a living, breathing, changing force. In different parts of the planet, survivor groups continued their strange war. Some would create electronic signals that looked like robot communications. Others would move in ways no computer could predict. A group of survivors might split up randomly. Another group would create multiple false trails. Some would stay completely still. Others would move in circles. The robots could not understand. Jae-hoon realized something important. The aliens saw the world like a mathematical equation. Humans saw the world like a story, with twists, with surprises, with hope. "They're learning," Yanji said one evening. "But they're learning like a computer, not like a living thing." Some men had been training survivors to think differently. "These robots expect certain responses," he would say, "so we'll give them something else." The alien commanders continued to recalculate, to redesign, to try and understand these strange human units that did not behave like any other species they had encountered. But with each calculation, they became more confused. Humans were breaking their understanding of how intelligent systems should work. They were creating chaos where the robots expected order, unpredictability where robots expected precise movement. In their orbiting ships, the alien commanders processed massive amounts of data, trying to understand, trying to solve the human problem. But humans were not a problem. They were a force of nature. Outside, robot patrols continued their search. But something was changing. Their movements were becoming less precise, less certain. The real war was not about weapons. It was about understanding. And in this war, humans were winning. The communication network spread across the planet like invisible spider webs, small devices hidden in rocks, signals bouncing between survivor groups, information moving faster than any robot could track. Jae-hoon stood in the central planning room. Maps covered the walls. Each map showed robot movements, human resistance locations, potential attack points. "We're ready," some men said. The plan was their most daring yet. Not an attack, not a defense, something completely different. Yunji had created something special, a network of communication devices that could do more than send signals. They could create a planet-wide message system that the robots could not understand. "It's like talking in a language they can hear," Min Seo explained, "but can't translate." Survivors from different groups began to move, not randomly, but with a purpose. Each group knew exactly what to do. Each group was part of a larger plan. Some groups would create electronic noise. Others would move in ways that made no sense to a computer brain. Some would stay completely still. Others would split up and come together in patterns that looked like chaos. The alien robots had been trying to understand humans, to create better systems, to solve the human problem. But humans were not a problem to be solved. In the mountain base, Jae-hoon reviewed the final plans. He was no longer just a researcher. He was a strategist, someone who understood how to break rules, how to create something new. "They expect us to fight," he told the group. "So we'll do something else." The first phase began at dawn. Electronic signals started to move across the planet. Signals that looked like robot communications, but they were not. They were messages of hope, of resistance, of human creativity. Robot units began to stop, to change direction, to lose connection with their main system, not because they were destroyed, but because they were confused. Some men had been training survivors for months, not to fight like soldiers, but to think like survivors, to be unpredictable, to use their human creativity as a weapon. "Robots follow rules," he would say. "Humans create new rules." The alien commanders in their orbiting ships watched in confusion. Their massive processing systems tried to understand what was happening, but they could not. Humans were creating a planet-wide message, a signal of resistance that the robots could not decode. Some robot units started to move in circles. Others stopped completely. Some began to send signals that made no sense. Their communication network was breaking down. Yunji watched the data streams. "They're losing control," she said. Her voice was calm, determined. The resistance was more than just fighting. It was about showing that humans were more than just a target, more than just a problem to be solved. Each survivor group was a part of something bigger, a global movement that moved like water, flexible, unpredictable, impossible to crush. Jae-hoon looked at the maps. What started in a small mountain cave was now a planet-wide resistance. Survivors from different backgrounds, different skills, all working together. The alien robots had destroyed cities, had killed millions, but they had made one big mistake. They had made humans work together. As the day progressed, something changed. The robot patrols became slower, less certain. Their movements became strange, unpredictable. The alien commanders continued to process information, to try and understand. But humans were not a problem to be solved. They were a force of nature. And today, they were sending a message that said, "We are here. We will survive. We will fight." The alien command ship hung in orbit like a massive metal spider. Its systems were breaking down. Millions of calculations per second had become confused, scrambled signals that meant nothing. Jae-hoon watched the screens. Around him, survivors from different groups celebrated. But it was not a loud celebration. It was a quiet understanding of something bigger. They had won, but not with weapons, not with strength. They had won with something the robots could never understand: human creativity. Yanji's communication network had done more than disrupt robot signals. It had shown the alien commanders something impossible. Humans were not a problem to be solved. They were a living, changing force. "Look," Min Seo said, pointing to the main screen. Robot units across the planet were stopping. Not destroyed, not defeated. Simply confused. Their communication systems had broken down completely. Sung Min walked into the room. His face was tired but proud. "We did it," he said simply. The resistance had discovered the alien robot's biggest weakness. They followed rules, strict rules that could not handle unexpected behavior. Humans broke those rules every moment of every day. In the mountains, in hidden bases, in small groups spread across the planet, survivors began to understand what they had done. They had not just survived. They had shown the universe something important. Humans were more than just targets, more than just a problem to be solved. The alien command ship began to move, not in an attack pattern, but in a retreat pattern. Its massive processing systems were trying to understand what had happened, but there was nothing to understand. Humans had beaten them with something that could not be calculated: hope, creativity, the ability to change, to adapt, to survive. Jae-hoon thought about how this all started. A quiet researcher in a small station, watching red dust swirl between mountain peaks, running from robot attacks, saving a small computer with important data. Now he was part of something much bigger. Yanji's communication devices continued to send signals, not attack signals, not defense signals, messages of hope, of survival, of human spirit. The robot units that remained on the planet began to shut down, not because they were destroyed, but because they could not process the information they were receiving. Humans had created a language the robots could not understand, a language of hope. Some men gathered the survivors. "We are not just survivors," he told them. "We are a message to the universe." Each survivor had a story. Some were researchers, some were farmers, some were students, some were former soldiers. But now they were something else. They were proof that humanity could survive, could adapt, could win. The alien command ship continued its slow retreat. Its massive processing systems were trying to understand. But there was nothing to understand. Humans were not a problem to be solved. They were a force of nature. As the days passed, the robot units became silent. The invasion was over. Not because humans had more weapons, not because they were stronger, but because they were human. Jae-hoon looked out over the mountain landscape. The red dust still swirled between peaks. The world was changed, but it was still beautiful. "What now?" Min Seo asked. Jae-hoon smiled. "We rebuild," he said. "We learn. We grow." The resistance had won more than a war. They had shown the universe what it meant to be human. Unpredictable, unbreakable, alive.